The New York Times blames nice white families, that's in quotation marks, nice white families, for the educational achievement gap between the different races. How dare suburban moms require their kids to succeed? If they had any social conscience at all, they would keep their kids idle, stupid, and arrogant. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and sometimes I just don't understand this world. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only show that tries to make sense of this world, the only show that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with our New York Slimes, our best and latest attempt to blame literally nice white families, their word, not mine, for the reason blacks and Hispanic kids aren't doing so well. And of course, they isn't it amazing when you start talking about education, how Asians don't count at all? We have, wait till we get to the Dr. Seuss show segment in Instant Classics today. We're going to talk about this more. When it comes to education, the first thing the left does is erase Asians. Why? Because their kids perform better than any other kids. Even though they haven't been here that long, even though they're racial minorities, even though they're not white people and therefore crushed under the boot heel of oppression, we erase Asian kids because they make the wrong point. That like any group in this country, if you apply yourself, you're going to do well. And who do we blame for the failure of American public schools? Couldn't you blame Asians more than whites? If Asians achieve better than whites, why is the New York the New York Times, why are they not blaming Asian families? In fact, Asian families are worse than white families because white kids do okay, but Asian kids do so well that it makes the gap between them and blacks much bigger than the gap between whites and blacks and Hispanics. But no, the New York Slimes prefers to erase Asian minorities who succeed.
Well, we know it's the gray lady, so of course they hate the white people. Yeah. The gray lady is the New York Times.
But anyway, they're all white.
So the New York Times, they have this new podcast. Okay, they decided to release a podcast this summer where it's going to be, I believe, a 5-part series, and they've already had 3 of them out there, and you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google if you want to waste your life or feel the need to poke out your eyes, or your eardrums for that matter. So it's actually called Nice White Parents, and it's about how white parents are preventing black and brown children from succeeding in public schools.
Before we play the clip, Karen alert. The idiot they got to read the voice over this?
It's reporter Chana Joff Walt, I think it's
Listen to the voice of the child they have reading this. Go ahead.
When we look for what's broken, for how our schools are failing, we focus on who they're failing. Poor kids, black kids, and brown kids. We ask, why aren't they performing better? Why aren't they achieving more? Those are not the right questions. There's a powerful force that is shaping our public schools, arguably the most powerful force. It's there even when we pretend not to notice it, like on that school tour. If you want to understand why our schools aren't better, that's where you have to look. You have to look at white parents.
That is one of the most racist, absurd, bigoted, paternalistic things I have ever heard in myself. Don't ask why black and brown-skinned kids aren't doing well. Ask instead what suburban moms are doing to make it impossible for black and brown-skinned kids to read and write. Not not asking what are Asian moms and dads doing right. We would never ask that. Because what are Asian moms and dads doing right? Discipline, hard work, no nonsense, a whack across the butt if you're not doing your homework. They're going to ground your butt. They're going to take away your cell phone unless you're doing your math. That's what the Asian families are doing. But we're going to ignore that. And we look to the minority communities where there are broken homes and apathy and lack of seriousness about school, utter an unwillingness of public schools to discipline black and brown skinned kids so that they can actually learn because, as Obama told us, that's racism, right? Punishing black kids for misbehaving, brown kids for misbehaving is disproportionate justice, right? So take away discipline, take away all the advantages to learn and nobody learns, right? So the Asians are doing it right. The blacks and brown-skinned kids generally are not. And who in this mess do we find to blame? Who is it that we must turn to elucidate why black and brown-skinned kids are illiterate? You got it, white suburban moms.
The nice white
The nice
parents.
ones. Apparently, if you're an unnice white mother, right? If you're a down and dirty white mother who's out hoeing around and getting drunk every night and ignoring your kid, not clothing or feeding your kids, apparently you're okay. Mm-hmm. But it's the Karens of the world. If you drive a minivan, if you wear pumps and pearls, if you get your hair highlighted once a month, you could be causing black illiteracy. It's the scourge of our time.
Wow. So what they're really not addressing in this entire thing is the simple fact that in these inner cities where the minorities, as they say, are not getting the education they need, and we know that, who's leading the charge for education? What is happening in these cities versus what's happening out in the suburbs where all like the nice white parents are living? Whose fault is that? It's the white. They're immediately going to the parents instead of looking at, I don't know, the administrators or the politicians who maybe are leading those cities for decades and decades and decades.
B-I-N-G-O, 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 and Katie was her name. Oh.
But you won't find bingo in the city.
You will
Bingo's
not.
out in the suburbs.
I mean, this is the thing. You go to white moms, you ignore the entire ownership of public schools by progressives. Yep. For the last 60, 70 years, who exclusively, from setting the pedagogy, to writing the textbooks, to formulating the tests, to teaching teachers how to teach, for 70 years, the American progressive left has been in charge of all of that. Just like progressives have been in charge in New York City for 70, 80, 100 years, right? And where was everybody dying from COVID? In New York City, right?
Oh, yeah,
that's right.
In the nursing homes.
Who's bankrupt and getting rid of cops as murders skyrocket place? Chicago and New York.
Name any big city.
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, the people who have ownership for this are white liberal progressives, not the moms who just want to give heaven forbid they give their kids an education, right? That's unforgivable that mom and dad insist on giving their kids an education. We don't want that.
No.
And if you had, like I said in my teaser, if you had any social conscience at all, if you were really down for the struggle of Black Lives Matter, you would keep your kids consciously ignorant in the suburbs, so that they weren't getting any farther ahead of African Americans or Hispanic Americans. And again, Asian who? Wait, Doctor Who.
Doctor Who. He's British.
Asian who?
Asian. Not quite the same.
That would be a great slogan.
Pasty white.
Asian
Doctor Who.
Sue. Here you got minorities.
Yes.
In this country who are succeeding at a rate that embarrasses everybody else. Why aren't we saying Asian who? Licensed to educate. Why are we not saying that? Why are we not why are we not begging Asian moms and dads to take over the public schools and fix them? Because that skews the narrative for progressives, right?
Yes, it does.
If you can't blame Whitey, it ain't worth doing.
And the smugness that they have when they wrote this to announce them talking about this nice white parents, it's just you get the aura. Here you go. We know that American public schools do not guarantee each child an equal education. 2 decades of school reform initiatives have not changed that. But when we look at how our schools are failing, we usually focus on who they're failing. Black and brown kids. We ask, why aren't they performing better? Why aren't they achieving more? Those are not the right questions, the Times says. According to the Times, those are not the right questions. If you want to understand what's wrong with our public education system, you have to look at what is arguably the most powerful force in our schools. And as we said, it's not suburban mom, but according to them, it's white parents. And they could not admit and look at the administrators, the politicians, and themselves. They could not look in a mirror, is basically what's happening today. And that's why we have all our kids failing. Well, again, more about, white people and white people learning too much now. Because you know what? With this pandemic going on, our schools haven't been open. Not that they were teaching our kids much anyway. But now the New York Times, in addition to the nice white parents they're taking offense to, they are taking offense to basically anyone who's trying to help your kids learn. So they published an op-ed by what they're calling a social emotional learning specialist, of course, a university person, who's arguing that white parents who organize these learning pods, basically you get kind of like a private tutor and you get the kids together and they learn. That's what used to be called education.
See, that's the mom thing that drives them nuts.
Exactly.
You fail at the public school to educate kids, then you stop teaching them with COVID. And when moms get together and in groups of 3 and 4 and hire a teacher, that's racist.
Yes,
too.
this is perpetuating racial segregation and white supremacy. Clara Totenberg Green actually works in the Atlanta Public Schools. Again, a social emotional learning specialist.
Beware, whenever you see a 3 named progressive woman, you know trouble's coming. I'm just pointing. Hey, that's one of Dr. Duke's axioms of truth. A hyphen woman is bad news for everybody.
Trouble in River City. Well, she says that learning pods seem a necessary solution. Yeah, because it's called education. They seem it. But, within this whole crisis of the pandemic and all that. But, in practice, they will exacerbate inequities, racial segregation, and the opportunity gap within schools. Children whose parents have the means to participate in learning pods will most likely return to school academically ahead, while many low-income children will struggle at home without computers or reliable internet for online learning.
And what you have here is a classic playbook from the socialists, right? Equity, not equality. Equality means you have the same opportunities, and you do. You can find all sorts of ways. If you've got the internet, and almost every kid in America does, and I just saw in, was it Philadelphia? 130,000 inner city kids get free internet, right?
Pretty much everyone everywhere.
This is the difference between equity and equality. Equality is what the United States Constitution strives for. Equality of opportunity. No one's prohibited from going to school. No one's prohibited from getting education. No parent is prohibited to spending more or less time on their kid's education. No parent is forced to do anything at all over and above whatever you want to do. Everybody has the same opportunity. Equity, on the other hand, if you notice how the word equity has been sweeping the country, equity means equity of outcome. So whether your kid cares or not, he cannot get a different education than the kid who does care. You might have the most engaged parents in the world working overtime to give their kids a private education, but that's not fair because not every parent will or can choose that. So unless we have an educational system where everybody only learns and knows the same things, we will have discrimination. And the only way you get everybody to the same place is the lowest common denominator. You can't set the bar high. Not every mother can band up in groups of 3 and 4 and hire a teacher. But every mother can do nothing and leave our kids ignorant. And so ignorance is equity to the progressive left. Let me repeat that. When it comes to schooling, ignorance is the only form of equality that's attainable to the progressive left.
Of course, she went on to say that, as is the case across the country, white families largely socialize with one another. White children are disproportionately represented in gifted and talented programming, and white parents dominate parent committees. Let's just flip the script. Black families largely socialize with one another. Is that not true then? If all the whites are sticking together, are the blacks all sitting there going, please let me in?
As a matter of fact, when you walk into any lunchroom, who segregates themselves? I know so many white kids who would love to have black kids just because it's cool.
It's cool, yeah.
But they're not interested. And by the way, there are more white kids in gifted and talented programs. There are more white kids succeeding in school. Am I mistaken, or is this country still not like 65% white?
Yeah.
So by definition, and we know 13% is the African American. Yeah. So we're like 5 times more white kids than black kids. So you call this overrepresentation? So no, see, in their mind, unless everyone looks the same, no matters don't number. And I can promise you, if you get to the point where it's 85% African Americans in this country and 15% others, they will still tell you there is inequity.
We'll just keep on with this whole theme, which is to say America 2020, being all about white supremacy. It's all about those whiteys. And it goes back all the way to the founding, when that thing called the Electoral College was born. At the same time, when the country was born. The Electoral College, we know, is born from white supremacy, according to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County political science professor William Blake. Oh, he seems like I want to hang out with him at a party. He has argued in an op-ed that the founders' only remaining justification for the Electoral College is structural racism. And the column he wrote was written actually in response to a Supreme Court decision in which the court decided that states can force Electoral College members to vote for the winner of the state's popular vote. So it all depends on how the state operates. But they're saying that, yeah, they can make those who are, if you know anything about the Electoral College, you have representatives, and they're the ones actually giving the vote on behalf of the popular vote of your state. Anywho, Blake wrote, the decision removed one of the two reasons why the framers of the U.S. Constitution created this election system, to empower political elites who may know more about the candidates than ordinary voters. Now, the founders' only remaining justification for the Electoral College is structural racism.
Yeah, that's the answer for everything.
Woo!
And these are the same. And throw up that picture again. I mean, dude, CPA. You got CPA written all over you. Go and be a CPA. There's, what's his name?
William Blake.
Okay, Bill. But notice this. These are the same liberals who are telling us that you just wait. In 5 more years, whites will be a minority, right? At that point, when people will be able to vote and use the Electoral College to snuff out that dwindling white vote, people like William Blake won't complain about that. It's an inconvenience. In other words, we have not destroyed white population in this country enough to make William Blake happy that white people no longer win elections.
And I'm sure he's against the filibuster right now, but, when whoever he enjoys is in power, then the filibuster's all great.
That's right.
This is the way our political system
works. And Mr.
works.
Blake, so which you voting for Obama? I'm sure you're voting for Biden, right? So you're perpetuating this racist white male thing. I'm pretty sure. Oh, and don't tell me, Mr. Blake, that he's the least of bad options. Be a man of your convictions and write in a black person. Do it. Strike a blow against those founding fathers. And when you say it's hysterical, when you say that racism and slavery were the reasons that the founders created the Electoral College, you have no idea what your history actually says. You're a 1619er, aren't you? Fake, made up history viewed from the lens of left-wing social justice practice and theory. What the founding fathers really did in creating the Electoral College is make sure that big urban population centers, almost all of whom were not slaveholding places. Let me repeat that, Mr. Blake. New York and Chicago and all the big cities, almost every big city, including most big southern cities, were not, I repeat, not huge hubs of slavery. Those were more in the country, weren't they? Those were more in the rural places, sir, where the plantations were. So for you to argue that the founding fathers did this to promote and perpetuate a racist system of slavery is not only historically ignorant, it's embarrassing. Drop what you're doing and go take up accounting. You already looked the way. Get yourself a bow tie and start playing with numbers because you are not handling words very well.
It's time for some real education. The political messages of Theodore Seuss Geisel, best known as Dr. Seuss, are found in many of his books. Seuss drew more than 400 cartoons for the New York newspaper PM in just a 2-year span in the early 1940s. Many of these cartoons were directed towards World War II, Adolf Hitler, and Japan. In particular, his cartoons about Japan have been called savagely racist and urged the killing of Japs. And now more than 200 of these cartoons have been republished.
And this shows you how complicated history is. And I want to take my instant classic time today to demonstrate to you why it is foolish and ignorant to judge every period of American history through the lens of the modern progressive. It is anti-education. It is anti-intellectual. It is the kind of stuff you're going to get in all your public schools with the 1619 curriculum moving forward, and it is shameful. Take Theodore Geisel, for example. He wasn't really Dr. Seuss until the 50s. Cat in the Hat was, I think, after 1955, 1957 maybe. He wasn't Dr. Seuss, the great children's author, until the 50s. But in the 40s, he was a patriotic, very progressive, I might add, American, who wanted to see the United States defeat the forces of imperialist Japan and fascist Germany. And so he used his cartooning ability to demonstrate, to create war propaganda, right? Now, it's interesting that people call these pictures savagely racist. Well, they're not even really racist by today's standards, let alone by the standards of the 1930s and 40s. But let's take a look at some of those pictures. There you have a situation, right, where the Californians are interring Japanese citizens, right? And you see how the title on the hut is Honorable Fifth Column, right? And all of these stereotypical-looking Japanese people with their little skull caps are heading there to be interred. Now, Geisel actually is warning about a couple of things. He is warning about the possibility that with a significant population of Japanese people in California, there could possibly be sympathetic outbreaks. Or is he in this picture simply criticizing the policy of the Americans? Go to the next one. Here you have a very uppity white aristocratic woman, and she's reading to her children the story of Adolf and the wolf. These are the nice suburban moms that we hate now. And the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones. But there were no foreign children, so it really didn't matter, right? Seuss is literally lecturing the Americans that as long as it's not American kids being swallowed up by the gas camps of Hitler, then America isn't that worried about it. Attacking America, this was the liberal progressive position in 1942. The liberal progressive position in 1940, get into the war or else you're justifying the murder of these children. America, go to the next one. There's Hitler and the leader of the Japanese. Only God can make a tree to furnish sport for you and me. And the trees all have Jews hanging from them, right? The lynching of the Jews in these two fascist countries. And you can see where his political sentiments lie. He's very progressive, but now move forward. See, notice the caricature. By definition, cartooning is caricature. And so that doesn't, if I were a real sensitive German nationalist, you're making fun of our leaders, right? That's the whole point. This is the enemy. Ensure your home against Hitler. Buy war savings bonds and stamps, right? Now, we're not bothered by caricatures of Hitler because Hitler was evil. He was also white. Now, go to the next one. Now, there's your savage racism right there. That's what racist. To have the leader of the Japanese portrayed that way. It's exactly the same thing they did with Hitler. Complete and total caricature. And notice the caption, wipe that sneer off his face. War savings, bonds, and stamps. It's the same message. Here is that same figure, portrayed in a political cartoon as a creature of the Pacific Ocean, some kind of lobster-clawed monster. There are pictures like that. Hitler like a dragon, by the way. He did Hitler in the shape of a dragon. Here, like some kind of sea creature. And the caption, I appeal to the civilized world in righteous protest against American barbarism and inhumanity. And the point is, he has the nerve to lecture us for our barbarism when they were doing what Germany was doing all across Asia. The rape of Nanking, people. It's a real thing. So explain to me what we actually gained by describing all of this in Seuss's racism. It wasn't racism. They were political cartoons designed to show the hypocrisy and the wickedness of the enemy. Oh, did he use the word Japs, right? Did Americans call Germans Krauts in World War II? Oh, then there's a perfect moral equivalency, isn't there, between the Nazis and the Americans? Because we use the word Krauts. Grow up, you cowardly babies.
Okay, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have any burning questions, just visit freedomproject.com/askduke. Now let's wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. Dr. Seuss's father was a master brewer and ran one of the most successful breweries in New England. And then the Prohibition hit, and so his dad began running a local zoo. And that's when little Theodore began drawing animals that he had seen in the zoo all over his walls.
And that's going to do it for us today. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay hortoned, my little whoos.